I would suggest to you that there is much faith in the world today that's like these rulers who believed but refused and have failed to confess Christ openly because they're more concerned about what people think of them, receive the praise of men rather than the praise of God. They have a faith. It may be a very informed faith. They may be able to recount the details of the gospel quite clearly, and they will claim all day long they believe it. But they don't confess it in a clear and open way before others because they're concerned about the consequences for doing so. And I would advocate that that would be more evidence of a false faith, a shallow faith, of an unsaving nature rather than saving faith. Because saving faith, according to the scriptures, is a faith that is confessed, a faith that's confessed before others, a faith that's confessed in one's words and one's life. A secret disciple of Jesus is no true disciple of Jesus, according to the scriptures. And again, I would suggest that there are many who profess to be Christian, and yet they're ashamed of Jesus. They don't make it known that they're Christians in the workplace, in school, in the neighborhood. That's not the kind of faith that should characterize us. Our faith should be one of confession, declaring Christ openly and fully before others, before our family, even when, and especially when, we know that there will be consequences for doing so. But these rulers of the Jews, although they say they're described as believing, they failed to confess their Christ. And so true saving faith is more than simply being convinced of who Jesus is and what he did on behalf of sinners. There is a faith, but it's not saving faith. One can be fully convinced of all the facts of the gospel, of who Jesus is. Believe who Jesus is. Believe that he died for sinners. Believe that he died for me as a sinner. But if it's not seen in one's confession of the lips and one's confession of one's life, it is a spurious faith. It's not saving faith. We're commanded in the scriptures to confess Christ openly, regardless of the consequences. And so saving faith is evidenced by commitment and confession. True saving faith is seen in one's confession of Jesus Christ as one's Lord and Savior, shown forth in one's life commitment to follow Jesus Christ in faith and obedience before the world. These rulers of the Jews believed in Jesus, but they would not confess him, for they were more concerned to have the praise of men than the praise of God. They did not have saving faith. J.C. Ryle wrote of how common this spiritual malady has infected the hearts of many who claim to be Christian. We may learn from these verses the amazing power which the love of the world has over men. We read that among the chief rulers, many believed on Christ, but because of the Pharisees, they did not confess him, lest they should be put out of the synagogue, for they loved the praise of men more than the praise of God. These unhappy men were evidently convinced that Jesus was the true Messiah. Reason and intellect and mind and conscience obliged them secretly to admit that no one could do the miracles that he did unless God was with him, and that the preacher of Nazareth really was Christ of God. But they had not courage to confess it. They dared not face the storm of ridicule, if not persecution, which confession would have entailed. And so, like cowards, they held their peace, kept their convictions to themselves. Their case, it may be feared, is a sadly common one. Ryle lived at the end of the 9th century. He happened to be a Church of England bishop, where there was so much nominal Christianity, and here he's hitting on that, I'm sure. There are thousands of people who know far more in religion than they act up to. They know they ought to come forward as decided Christians. They know that they are not living up to their light, but the fear of man keeps them back. They are afraid of being laughed at, jeered at, and despised by the world. They dread losing the good opinion of society and the favorable judgment of men and women like themselves. And they go on from year to year, secretly, ill at ease and dissatisfied with themselves, knowing too much of religion to be happy in the world, and clinging too much of the world to enjoy religion. And what he meant by that was true Christianity.